Hey there, it's Baracco. I've been sick for the past few days, you can see with the blanket of course, but because I've been sick, I've had a lot of time, and I could use that to climb to Diamond 5 with RUNICK SPRIGHT. Did this on a fresh account, which was at Gold 5 as the season started, and well, I've been playing nothing but this deck for practically hours, so this is a bit unhealthy, I'll admit, but I have the time to spare, so let's get into it. RUNICK SPRIGHT is a deck that's been wildly popularized, and rightfully so, by Joshua Schmidt. He took that deck to top at a mostly pure sprite with totally awesome and tier limit format in YCS Utrecht, and this deck is already hard as balls to pilot, so that demands massive respect, but it also brought a lot of attention, even taking some of the random tech cards in this deck and making them skyrocket in price. Like, for example, this thing's like 15 pounds or something. For fuck's sake, this thing? Let's suspend that disbelief for a second and talk about RUNICK SPRIGHT and what's so cool about it and why I think you should play this and not the ew cringe live twins, right? But what the hell is this deck anyways? This deck is an amalgamation of three things in my opinion. One, generic level 2 toolboxes. Number two, sprites which are used with that level 2 toolbox. And finally, the Runicks, which happen to have a level 2, which is why this deck even works in the first place. The sprites are there to offer a lot of gas and combo potential with a couple of negates and disruptions, but more importantly, a lot of explosiveness. The level 2 toolboxes are there to help you just draw more, whether it's Max C, whether it's Hyperia, whether it's Capshell, or whether it's also the unique disruption that Wind-Up Kitten causes. And lastly, the Runicks. They give you basic spot removal and toolbox protection, such as that of Slumber, that of Freezing Curses, that of Flashing Fire. There's a lot of versatility that comes with that. There's also a lot of grind game with this deck because of Runic Fountain, letting you shuffle things back into your deck. And then there's also a lot of versatility that can be had with your hands. You have a lot of different ways you can out things, mostly by just trusting the heart of the cards and drawing 3 with Runic Fountain and praying you get something good. And so, well, you have this deck. Now, how exactly do you pilot this deck? I can't tell you that because it's a bit hard for me to say. RUNICK SPRIGHT is very non-linear. There's no one right or wrong way. Even the basic combo to get out your gigantic sprite or start swarming your field can have many different variations. You could make the elf first, or you could make the gigantic sprite first. There's maybe a better one to do first in certain situations, but overall, it's very free flow, and because of that, there's a bit of a paradox of choice. You could try to end your game by getting a Djinn Buster and IP Mask Arena. You could try to do the Sprite Red and Carrot with some free materials to tribute off of with Sprite Elf. You could try set up the Sprite Starter in your back row so that you can summon more bodies to prevent being killed, or you could summon the aforementioned Red and Carrot. You could also try to get Smashers out, which can or can't be really good. It really is dependent on situation. Overall, there's so much the deck can do that it's a bit daunting, but I will try to give some tips the best I can. First of all, let's go over some of the cards and what they do. I'm sure you guys have seen all the sprites all over ladder, so I'm going to keep what they do short. All these boys are extenders when you control level link or rank 2, and this thing searches for monsters. This thing, which is an optional 2 to 3 of, can search back row, which can be your Smashers, which is removal, or your starter, which is a semi-limited special summon from deck, which is crazy. You have Red, which can tribute your level 2 link to a rank 2s in order to negate a monster, and Carrot, who can do that for spell traps. We also do run Hyperia. You summon it once per turn, draw 1. Capshell, if you send it to grave as a link material, or if you detach it, whatever, it's a draw 2. You have, of course, Wind-Up Kitten, which is a bounce as it's on the field. It's a soft once per turn, so you could loop this by sending it to the graveyard by linking it off for, let's say, an elf, and then resurrecting it, and then using it again. Can be very funny to out boards, especially double lava golem boards. Max C in very fringe scenarios, because you need to get 2 level 2s on the board to usually start your engines. You might normal summon Max C and combo off with it, but it's not very likely. And then you have all the runic cards, so you have your double Runic Fountain. I've played it at 3 before, but I think at 2 it's best. We want to keep the engine compact. We have plenty of ways of searching it with our 3 tip, with our 3 Hugins, so I would recommend lowering its count to 2, but you can run it at 3. It is fine, air quotations. 3 tip, which is the searcher for Runicks. We have triple Flashing Fire, triple Destruction, triple Freezing Curses. They're the best runic removal spells. You have 1 Slumber. This does pop up occasionally, and 1 Smiting Storm. This can be replaced with another Slumber, but having extra runic names can be important in the grind game when you're trying to draw as much as you can. And then we just run some generic cards. So we run, of course, Ash Blossom, but at 2. The deck has so much draw power that running extra Ash Blossoms might, in some cases, ruin your hand. You run the double called by, 1 forbidden because it's from a bundle deal, 1 imperm because it's from a bundle deal. Yeah, also lightning storm, I would recommend increasing on the lightning storms or at least getting triple tactics talents because this deck does struggle in some aspects, which we'll talk about. And then the extra deck, we're running 3 Hugin, 1 Moonin, and 1 Gary. You might use Gary from time to time, but overall, you would rather just continue to use Hugin every single time. Moonin is almost useless, but we're running it anyways just in case the life points might be relevant to us, in case we really want to last longer in the grind game. But again, you're rarely ever going to summon this, and if you are, you're going to link it off pretty fast anyways. You have Jin Buster. This is very funny. It requires 2 level 2 dark monsters. Detach 2, it's a monster negate, pretty funny. You have Onibimaru. This is a very interesting way to wipe your opponent's board, where you can detach materials, banish monsters your opponent controls to the end of the turn like Malevolent Sin, but then choose to also shuffle those banished monsters back into the deck, which is pretty good version of removal if I'm going to be honest. We also have Double Gigantic Sprite. It is generic level rank 2. Detached material, you're locked into a level 2 rank 2's link 2's, your opponent also is, so you're proofed, you are Nibiru proof for that turn. Special summon any level 2 from the deck. So whatever the situation is, whether you think you want to break boards with Kitten, whether you want to draw more with Hyperia or Cap Shell, whether you want to get your sprites on board because you haven't already done that with Sprite Blue or Sprite Jet, whatever the fuck you want to do, you can do that. So this card is obviously a mandatory card, and because it doesn't detach for cost, this thing can actually be really, really interesting. And if you overlay into it using either Hugin or Link 2, because you can overlay into it using Link 2s and treat them as their level 2s, this thing is 3200, so that's pretty interesting. We have IP because we can make things like Nightmare Unicorn or Crusade Avermax. It's helpful sometimes, but again, it's really if you want to make those kind of boards, and if you tend to find those kind of boards useful, you could always choose to gravitate towards them. At the beginning, when I started my climb, I made a lot of IP boards, but as I progressed further, I decided to diversify and change the kinds of boards, and from the last like 20 matches, I didn't make a single IP, but it will still be very useful. We run a dark because mirror matches, because dark monsters are very common to see in the graveyard. You run double elf. This thing is crazy. I understand why this is banned. It's generic. You require to use a level 2 link to a rank 2, which is easy to make it, and you can reborn those same kind of monsters. Quick effect during either player's turn. So you can use this to cycle things like Hyperia, cycle things like Wind Up Kitten, as I mentioned before. Fucking crazy card. Why? And of course, we have the aforementioned Unicorn and Avermax. And well, that's what the deck looks like. Now there's some things I need to talk about before you ever try to even touch this deck. So there's some really good reasons why you should play this deck over Live Twin Sprite. First of all, I think it's infinitely more based, but it's extremely fun. As I mentioned, this non-linearity, there's just a lot to do with this deck. There's a lot to learn. No 2 duels are the same. This could be a demerit for some because some people like simpler decks, but for all of you guys who like to combo off and not know where you're necessarily going, but want to just play a game where you're constantly at odds with what you choose and your choices really matter, this is a really great deck for you. It's also extremely powerful. It's got a really good grind game. There's a lot of great aspects to this deck. And lastly but not least, I just think it's gonna survive for a long time. When Shizu tiers eventually do come, and even though I hope they'll hit the Shizu cards, they probably will not, this deck is still gonna be good once that deck is slaughtered eventually, as it will be. And Sprites just won't die. I'm very sure they won't die. They aren't gonna have their shit absolutely bamboozledly limited, banned, and whatever. It's not going to be unreasonable. At least I don't think it is. This deck's going to stand the test of time. But there are some demerits for this deck. First of all, it is hard to learn. It is hard to pilot. So it could be the source of a lot of frustration for you. So the biggest positive in my book can be a big old demerit for you. Second, it really struggles when it comes to the battle phase, not just because you skip out on your battle phase with your runic stuff, but also because you don't really put out big attack monsters. Your best monster to do in this case is precisely just Avermax, but most of the time, because you're going to use a gigantic sprite, you're not going to be able to summon them during your turn, so you have to make sure IP Masquerena resolves, which is a little frustrating, but it can be very powerful, but that's the only route you got. It also does suffer from not being able to break boards very easily. If you draw Lava Golem, which has become extremely clutch, especially in some Eldritch matches as I've had recently, this thing is great, but it's only if you draw it. This thing has been great as well, but when it comes to boards where there's just endless amounts of back row or monsters, it's very tough for you to go through. This deck is great in the best of 3 format, but because we're in best of 1, we have to just trust in the heart of the cards and stuff, and sometimes they just aren't in our favor. We don't draw our board breakers, and well, we're stuck with like popping 1 card, negating a single card, maybe ashing, but otherwise not being able to do too much. So, you know, there's that. And lastly, this deck is also a little bit on the expensive side. I mean, the runics are already expensive enough. The hand traps are going to run you a little bit. You probably have to run board breakers, probably multiples of Lightning Storm. And the sprites themselves, while they aren't expensive, they're still not exactly cheap. So this is going to run you a pretty penny. And lastly but not least, you have to depend on the heart of the cards. Sometimes you have to normal summon Hyperia and pray you draw something good off the top, pray you get another runic so you can combo off, pray that you get something, and even with the runics, even though the statistical probability you'll draw into something good is higher than just a normal summon Hyperia scenario, it can still be very daunting and sometimes you just don't get anything. It's a little frustrating. And so, yeah, if you want to play a deck that'll get you more wins, probably Live Twin Sprite is the deck to play because they can Scythe Lock you, but I think that's very cringe, so I'm playing this deck instead. And of course, because I can't just leave you hanging on that, I will get a replay out as to how the deck plays. You know, just gotta explain what the deck really looks like in action, because again, I can't just tell you a combo. I kind of have to show you what it's like. So I'll give you a single duel to just have a little bit of a taster of it, and then, well, make the deck if you'd like. We win the coin toss, and yeah, okay, this duel. We had a pretty decent hand. We can break boards, so we're gonna keep on holding this Lava Golem. We have a lot of things here. We get Max Seed. We got the Called By. Absolutely gaming on this boy, so get that. But I believe this person has an Ash, which is a little frustrating. So we're gonna Called By. That Max Seed gets Max Seed out of existence, and then we get to special summon the Sprite Red. We overlay these two into Gigantic Sprite, and then, still waiting for this to finish. This is a gorgeous animation, by the way. My god, Konami, you did such a good job with this. Activate effect, we get ashed. Ooh, unfortunate. So in this case, we aren't really left to do anything. So best case scenario, we activate Runic Tip. We search for something that might get us out of the next situation, which is Freezing Curses. It's negate, pretty safe. We also set card, and then boom, that's it. Our opponent has Returnia, so we know they're on Exorcister. So, well, we just gotta pray they don't draw any ass. They set 2, interesting. Alright then, bet. Then we got a Jet. We'll activate our Gigantic Sprite at the beginning of the turn, right? We get Impermed, what the fuck? Again? This shit gets really annoying, but whatever, fine. We didn't detach material, so we don't get to get that, you know, cap. What was the thing that we used again? We don't get to use the cap shell effect, so we get Jet instead. Jet will get the starter. Starter is going to get the blue. Blue effect is then going to search for the red, which is, again, pretty safe as an option. Summon the red. We're going to use these two as link material. We're going to make the Sprite Elf. Really good card. Why is this thing at unlimited? Fucking hell, man. We're going to target the Jet, summon that back, and then we end the... We just end our turn. We don't really have anything to do. We used a runic spell as well, so we can't really do much. And while our opponent kind of concedes. This wasn't exactly the most gassed up match that I could find. I just clicked one randomly, but this is going to show you how your duels are generally going to go. You're going to have to make a lot of decisions, you know, whether they're going to be really cool decisions you can make or really underwhelming ones, like, do I get a Freezing Curses or do I get a Destruction from that Runic Tip? Whatever it is, they're going to be there. It's going to be a little bit difficult because sometimes they'll mean so much in certain matchups and so little in certain others, but that's what I like about the deck. Your choices really do matter. And well, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this Sprite deck profile. If you do, you know what to do. Hit the like, hit the sub, definitely leave a comment, tell me what you think. The ratios in my deck list are a little bit wacky, but I've had to adjust them a lot, and so far they're working for me. So hey, any feedback, you let me know. Otherwise, you have a wonderful day, you bastards. And stay inside, stay safe, don't get sick like my stupid ass. Bye!